Hey guys, this is Mikro. I'm coming back with another video, and this one's gonna be about what I think will happen when the PTR changes drop and like what changes will happen in terms of like meta builds, and as well as like talking about the build that got me banned in OPR and why I think it might be really good next patch. So basically the basis for this entire discussion is Ice Gauntlet and the OPR basically got changed so much that it is probably not going to be a viable secondary weapon for most people. Slash, there will be a better utility secondary weapon than an Ice Gauntlet almost always. And the reason why I say this is Ice Gauntlet is meta right now, and has been meta for basically the entirety of New World because of this final ability called Ultimate Chill, which increases damage that is ice damage no matter who is applying the ice damage to a target by 25%. Which is why almost every single ice gauntlet was running this tree or a very similar tree, and you had to get all these perks on the left in order to get this ultimate chill, because ultimate chill was the most utility oriented ability in the game and enabled lots of different combos and forced different metas even where people were specifically gemming against ice damage. Not for the actual ice gauntlet itself, because the ice gauntlet doesn't do that much damage, but because ultimate chill was applying such a massive damage buff slash like red to people that they had to slot ice gems in order to like counter this. So I can't really overstate how powerful this ultimate chill has been, and that's why there's almost always been a discussion with people where it's like, oh, what secondary are you gonna run? Like if you're gonna run a secondary like offhand, it's either gonna be an ice gauntlet or it's gonna be a rapier like 90% of the time for mage players. And rapier it's not as popular because ultimate chill is just so much better. And then the ice shower rend is also nice, but it's not nearly as good as that ultimate chill. Like 10% rend, it's okay, right? And you can catch people with ice shower and you can kill people, but the entire basis of why this class has been played has been for ultimate chill and a little bit of entomb, but I'd argue entomb is a very overrated perk. Because if you entomb most of the time, people are gonna know you used entomb and then they're gonna come after you and they're just gonna kill you. And you're always like, when you entomb, you're usually in a bad spot and you're gonna stay in that bad spot. So it's not as big of a saving ability as I think people think it is. Uh, so these changes is like why I've started experimenting with other secondary weapons. With the blunderbuss, there's like a lot of options with it, and I think the blunderbuss is still going to be broken next patch. Mostly because of empowered armor breaker, which I don't think I have on this one. See if I have a or if I have a hand on this account with it. I think this one has it. Yeah, empowered breaker. So this is like that perk I was talking about that gives you empower if your attacks are getting blocked, and I think this perk is very, very, very strong next patch because of how prevalent Greatsword will be, because I assume Greatsword will be overtuned because every single weapon in this game that has come out has been overtuned at the beginning and then has been meta throughout the duration of New World. Like we've had the Void Gauntlet, still played, has been played since day one it came out. You have the Blunderbuss, which itself made a whole new meta because it was so broken, and it was somehow even more broken than Void Gauntlet. And then we're going to go into a meta where Greatsword's coming out, so I assume Greatsword will be almost always a viable secondary slash preferred weapon for most melee players. So this empowered breaker really takes advantage of the fact for Greatsword that people will be running this Path of Defiance, so if they're doing a heavy attack, they will be blocking. And when you're blocking, and then you trigger that empowered breaker, you're getting instant 20% empower for 5 seconds because Blunderbuss shoots 6 shots at a time, right? So you're basically going to be sitting at 20% empower constantly if you run that perk, so I don't see a reason to not ever run that perk next patch. Especially for Blunderbuss, because Blunderbuss has multiple pellets, which interacts with the game in a funny way because each pellet counts as an attack, so you get those abilities that count, but you normally would not be as overpowered with like a one, because you'd have to keep hitting someone that's blocking, become really overpowered with a Blunderbuss, or become a lot stronger anyway. So this is like, I guess, why I've been experimenting with other things besides Ice Gauntlet. I obviously put out a video yesterday where I was testing out having a Sword and Shield as a secondary, which seems very, very weird at a surface level, like why I would think Sword and Shield would be very good as a secondary. Like usually when you see Sword and Shield players, they're not like I'll pop the food to show like what I was running, but you don't see people running this stat split like at all. Like the 301, it should be a little bit more in a con, but like you get the idea here. Like I'm not running Sword and Shield with 500 con. I don't think you need 500 con for a Sword and Shield. And the reason why I think Sword and Shield is so good is because of the shield and what perks you can actually get on the shield. So this Fortified Shield Rush is really good, but I don't think it's nearly as broken as the fact that you can get Slash Ward and like other wards on the shield, and then that applies to your offhand as well. Like you don't have to have the Sword and Shield out. Like that's crazy to me. Like I literally have 20% fire. Like look at my resistances on this character. It's just so crazy to me, and this is why I think SNS is like potentially viable, because you could just have so much more. You could be so much more tanky, and you don't even have to use the SNS itself. But the SNS also comes with like a lot of benefits. But I'd say I'm like running it in a very atypical fashion, and I started running it this way because I was running it in OPR, and I obviously, if it wasn't clear from a video or two ago, I got banned running this build in OPR because people thought I was cheating. It might have been because I was trolling Dex players a lot, and then they got mad and mass reported me, but I'm pretty sure this is just like secretly very strong. So most people would just go like this far right tree and they would basically do everything on here, including Defiant Stance. The reason why I don't think Defiant Stance is actually that good, which might be a controversial claim to like some people have played this build for a while. First of all, it's a 45-second cooldown, so unless you have a Refreshing Ward, you're never going to use it again. It's like a 30% fortify, right? That fortify could be instantly stripped, and the 30% fortify is equivalent to this. And then if I also look at shield rush, which I have on my shield, that's more than a 30% fortify, so that really does not do that much. And it's on a significantly longer cooldown. And then if I go to like these other perks, this is just like, okay, 50% fortify, sure, but I'm going to be at fort cap anyway just because of my gems. Because I have like 20% resistance to slash now and 20% to fire, so I'm very, very tanky. And then if I stand in the sacred, then I'm at like 30% base to slash, right? And then if I pop shield rush, then I'm at fort cap for everything. So it's like, I don't really need that. So then I took that point and I was like, okay, so what could I do with Sword and Shield that would be really good? Like, I know this Shield Bash is good. I didn't go down to this last thing because it's always going to get interrupted during a war. Someone's always going to hit the guy. I don't need 3 seconds for this. So I was like, okay, maybe I could go Leaping Strike and then I could use that as an escape ability or an engage ability, and that has felt really good. And on top of that, it naturally applies to slow. I can get like a haste built into here, which doesn't really matter that much, but it's like kind of nice in OPR. And I basically took an OPR build that I found success in and I brought it into war, and it felt fairly strong on current patch, and next patch it will be significantly better because Ice Gauntlet is basically just getting gutted. Like, if you don't have this ultimate chill, if you're running Ice Gauntlet like this, you're running it as like a pad build, which in my opinion is just useless. Like, you might as well just go Ice Spike and play for a kill squad build, but then at that point you're not going to be playing this with like 90% of builds. Like, the only utility in Ice Gauntlet, once Ultimate Chill is gone, is like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe Wind Chill and Ice Shower. Like, Entomb doesn't even do that much. Like, I'd say Entombed is probably worse than using Leaping Strike defensively. It's probably worse than using Net Shot. It's probably worse than using Blast Shot in some cases. It's definitely worse than everything the Rapier has. It's probably worse than Hatchet using Feral Rush, and I'm just saying this because you use Entomb in a high-level war, and people will be like, oh, this guy used Entomb, I'm gonna go kill him. And you're not gonna live. Like, the best part about Entomb is you can generate stamina while you're using your Entomb so that you have dodges after. But then if you're playing for that utility, you might as well just go repost and get the Sundering repost on your Rapier, which puts a 20% rend on people, and you do the same thing, or you're generating stamina. I just don't see a world where Ice Gauntlet is like nearly as prevalent next patch, unless the crowd control is really that important. But I have a feeling that it just won't be, because this Ultimate Chill will the way they're changing it, which I didn't really read through the forum post, is basically what is rumored to be happening, and I have heard from like probably 20 different people at this point, is that the ultimate chill is not going to apply to your allies. It's only going to apply to yourself. So it basically means that ultimate chill is not nearly as good as it is right now. It's like barely even viable, and it will make it so Ice Gauntlet is like almost never run. So then if you're looking at viable secondary weapons and like things that will shift, I think the immediate thing is everyone is probably going to try to figure out a way to run Void Gauntlet Blunderbuss. And the reason why they'll do that is because these two weapons have a lot of utility, and Ice Gauntlet is basically useless next patch. So there will be a lot of people that are probably going to be experimenting between this and trying to figure out a way to make it work. It kind of works right now. You have to go in a net shot because it's your only defensive ability between those two that could like really help you get out of situations. But the reason why I don't love the Void Gauntlet in that situation is like so many of these abilities are good, but they lock you into like longer animations that tend to get you into stun chain situations that are not very fun to be in. Like if I scream something, like I'm stuck in this scream animation for like a second and a half, and in that time I can't dodge, and I will get hit by something. If I drop an Oblivion, I'm stuck in an animation for like half a second to a second, and if I get hit during that, I can't dodge anything. And that's like really, really annoying sometimes in wars, but this should be played a decent amount next patch, especially because diseases are going to be more, like they'll last longer. The rend from Diminishing Orb will be probably actually really good. And then Oblivion's just always good because Oblivion's just like a crazy ability. In terms of like, so I basically think everything is going to be played around a Blunderbuss because there's no other secondary weapon that would be good for a mage at this point. Like if you're doing Fire Staff Ice Gauntlet, then you're not a utility class, right? If you're doing Fire Staff Void Gauntlet, you're not a utility class. So like, if you're thinking, okay, I need to play around my Void Gauntlet, my options are I'm going into Blunderbuss, I'm going into Rapier, or I'm doing something really, really weird and I'm going to like SNS or Sword and Shield. Going into Sword and Shield or like something, I don't even know. Like you could maybe even go into this Defiant Stance, not for the damage at all, just because of the utility, but that seems so weird to me. And I think at that point you probably would just not run much in and not really worry about your Void Gauntlet doing damage because the point of your Void Gauntlet isn't to do damage anyway, it's just for the CCs. So I think mages overall are going to be very, very heavily nerfed, and the saving grace is Blunderbuss is still probably going to be broken. Like, even though a lot of people are like, oh, but it can be blocked now, but that block is going to turn into a power if you run that, like, a perk I talked about earlier, and then that's just going to let you do a lot more damage. So that's why I was like running this SNS build and have been experimenting with it. The utility from the SNS is very, very prevalent. So this shield rush, I showed the 30% fortify it gives me earlier, which is very nice. Also, everyone within a 5 meter radius, a 5 meter radius is like pretty big. Like let's see, what's the radius on Void Gauntlet for reference? So this is a 5 meter radius, right? Oblivion's a 5 meter radius. So this is the radius that will be affected when you hit an enemy with shield rush. It's like a very large radius, and that's like a solid like third of the point probably, I'd say. So you hit someone with that ability, and then it applies a 10% weakened. Keep in mind, cleanse pots are not going to be as prevalent next patch, so that's probably going to actually stick. And that's like global 10% weakened, so people are doing 10% less damage, which is like equivalent to having a 10% fortify, but actually a little bit better because it can't be stripped, and the only way they can remove it is by using a cleanse pot, so I'd say it's a little bit better than a fortify. Also applies a 30% slow. That's only for 4 seconds, but a 30% slow is like very, very good to just land on a healer or near a healer, and then they just like literally can't run away. You could chain that slow into a slow that you have on your basic, so then that healer can't run away at all. You chain that into leaping strikes, and that healer still can't run away at all. You chain that into shield bash, and then they're stunned again. So basically, this is like the most anti-fun build I have like played in a while, which might be why I got mass reported. I wouldn't be that surprised. And then the shield also has these all these other perks that are like really, really nice as a secondary. Like you gain more armor, you gain more magic armor, like physical and magic armor. You can gain fortify when you have your shield out and blocking. The blocking I don't think matters as much. It's mostly just like the fact that you get all these extra perks when you have a shield. like the blocking is useful at times, but I don't think it should be the primary focus of like shield gameplay. Like if you know they're crashing onto you, then yes, blocking can be very good because it keeps people alive, and then you can swing that crash and swap to other weapon. But I think like the 500 con, like I'm just gonna block and stand still thing is like probably not the best way to play Sword and Shield, to be honest. I think it's like not bad in certain situations, but there's not a lot of like you're not doing that much when you're playing it that way. I think you have to play it more offensively at times. But that's just like my personal take on like Sword and Shield. And then there's this other aspect of Sword and Shield that I haven't really heard anyone talk about that's really good. So Sword and Shield, I don't know which YouTuber posted the first like idea behind this, but if you actually go through like the light attacks compared to the heavy attacks with the sword and shield, it has one of the fastest heavy attacks animations in the game. And why that matters is because you could actually roll Plague Strikes and Trenchant Rend on the same sword and shield. So a lot of people, these are perks that you've never heard of, and that makes sense. But what Plague Strikes does, it's a 24% disease, right? And Trenchant Rend is a 14% rend, and you're not always having the sword and shield out, so you're probably going to proc this Trenchant Rend most of the time. The cooldown doesn't really matter. But, okay, 24% disease, 14% rend, right? Avoid Gauntlet Scream without the perk on the weapon. Let me... I think I have a piece in here that has that. That's one I got yesterday. That's very nice. It was a steal. I am looking for the Void Gauntlet piece. I am sorry. I have too many things in my inventory and they have not put out the thing yet. So 29% disease, right, for a Void Gauntlet Scream. This says, and this is like, and it lasts for 8 seconds, so it's the same amount of time. And this is on a 25-second cooldown. This has a 0-second cooldown. Void Gauntlet Orb. If you go to the actual diminishing orb itself, this has a maximum rend it could proc that is 15%. If you look at this is 14%. So what this lets you do is I could heavy attack, albeit it's on a one person, it's not an AoE, and it applies the amount of utility that a Void Gauntlet does in 5 seconds in about like a second, but it's to a single person. So I do that, and you could just burst someone down in a clump. And then you juggle on top of that all these like extra armor perks that you get for Sword and Shield, and the fact that you could have slash ward on a Sword and Shield, so it doesn't even matter if you have this out or not. I have my Blunderbuss out now. Oh, it actually does go away. So it does matter if you have this out. But still, if you're going, like, if you're getting hit in a clump, you are either going to have the Fortify from Blunderbuss or you're going to have the Fortify from Sword and Shield. So it's like, both of these are very, very tanky, and there's like a lot of utility that you could juggle with both, which is why I'm experimenting with this. But I also think there's like other options, like I could run a rapier build that primarily focused around like living with the repost. I don't have rapier leveled on this character, but it would be like the typical survivability. Oh, I've got repost, I've got evade, and I've got flush A or something like that. Or maybe you can get like really fancy and you can do like the flourish and finish like bleed build that some people have been experimenting with that basically just one-shots people. But I think that will be like more of a DPS oriented build. So anyways, I think that will be what people look at next patch, and I'll be experimenting with that more, as well as the sword and shield. And thanks guys, I'll be back with you in the next video.